Hello everyone, and welcome to a video that's a little bit different to usual, where I'll be doing some quickfire reviews of movies that I simply haven't had the time to review yet. And the reason I'm doing this is because, well, basically my schedule is very clogged up at the moment. I'm currently up to here with uni work. I'm in the process of finishing a work placement that is again also for uni, and on top of all that, I am currently planning some future videos that I want to bring to this channel as well. So, as you can kind of see, I've rarely had the time to get some reviews out, especially within the last few weeks. So I thought the easiest thing to do was basically take all of the movies that I have yet to review and just kind of shove them into one video. Now, a lot of the movies I will be talking about in this video are very recent releases, to the point where I have seen them within the last week or so, but I just know in my head that I will not be able to set aside enough time to do a full-length review of some of these movies. So that's why I will be talking about them in this video, but it's not just very recent releases. There's also a couple of movies in this video that I watched quite a few months back. They're still 2018 releases, it's just that I saw them several months ago and just haven't had the chance to do reviews of them because other stuff has cropped up since. So as well as reviewing those very new releases, I'll also be taking time out to talk about the movies that I saw a couple of months ago and try and mix them up within the new releases as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to get straight into it, and the first movie that I want to talk about is Unsane, directed by Steven Soderbergh. In the end, I think this movie was pretty decent. I don't think it's great, but there's a lot of potential here. Claire Foy is fantastic in this movie, like always, and I think the whole gimmick of filming on an iPhone kind of works for the sake of the movie, especially in the sense that all the shots look a little bit off in terms of how they're positioned and just the overall aesthetic of the movie. But yeah, I think it works for the film because it adds a sense of uneasiness to the whole thing, and especially considering the subject matter that it's tackling, which being, you know, going insane, I think it works quite well. Like I just said, Claire Foy is really good in the movie, and she adds a lot of nuances and just subtle facial expressions that kind of make you doubt whether she is fully sane or not. Just like, there are some moments where she acts completely normally, completely sane, but it's the look she gives in her face and those subtle nuances that kind of makes you go, actually, I don't think she's all there. And that's just something really good that I liked about her performance. The supporting actors, on the other hand, they differ between really good and kind of crap. Some of them are really good, like Juno Temple and this one guy whose actor's name I cannot remember, but he helps Claire Foy's character quite a lot in the movie. He's really good in the film. But then there's some other supporting characters which don't quite work and are not acted the best. And whilst I'm talking about nitpicks, the soundtrack is a bit of a mess. Sometimes it does work quite well, but there are quite a few times where the soundtrack really just doesn't work and feels out of place with the images you're seeing on the screen. And in that sense, like, yeah, I mean, it's an okay soundtrack, but like I said, there are a couple of moments, especially towards the start and the end, which are just really abrupt and really did not work for me. But in the end, I do think this is a pretty good thriller that I can see myself watching in the future, but I'm in no hurry to watch it again immediately. Probably if I see it on TV or on Netflix somewhere down the line, I'll probably stick it on and go, oh yeah, this movie's not that bad. But at this current time, I have no, instinct to immediately watch it again, which is why I'm going to give Unsane a 7.5 out of 10. The next movie I want to talk about is the brand new Netflix original film written and directed by the Coen brothers called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I was really excited to see this film, mainly because it's made by the Coen brothers. I've been a fan of their work ever since I first saw No Country for Old Men for the first time. That being said, I am aware that not every movie they have made is perfect. There's a couple of their movies that are yet to connect with me. But that being said, whenever they do make a great film, they are really good, like Burn After Reading, Inside Llewyn Davis, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, No Country for Old Men. All fantastic films that I absolutely love. And in regards to the Ballad of Buster Scruggs and where that fits in with their filmography, it's definitely one of their good films, but I wouldn't necessarily place it up there with some of their best. It's good, but it kind of falls short in being one of their great ones, and instead it just ends up being one of their good ones. For those of you that don't know what this movie is about, it's basically an anthology movie that follows 6 separate stories set within the Wild West. Nothing connects them except for the fact that they are set in the West. That is literally it. And I think for the most part, this concept works quite well. The first 4 stories I thought were really, really good. The first one being absolutely hilarious and one of my all-time favourites. And my other highlight being, I think, the 4th one, which involves a prospector looking for gold. That one is really good as well. 2 and 3 are also quite good, but I don't think they're as strong as 1 and 4. But again, the first 4 stories are definitely the strongest in the entire film. 5 and 6, on the other hand, kind of feel a little bit lackluster, because for the most part, these stories are very snappy, very to the point, and just kind of, you know, have their own little purpose for that short space of time and then just move on to the next one. The 5th story feels like the longest, I think because it is very slow compared to the others. And it kind of grounds the movie to a halt a little bit. You have 4 relatively fast-paced stories, and then a 5th one which is just really slow, and it makes the whole film slow down. But then you have the 6th one, which goes by too quickly. It's a very odd mix, and I don't quite know what happened, but I think if they had just rejigged the order of the stories, I think the pacing could have worked a little bit better. Maybe having story 5 as story 6 could have worked a little bit better, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, the 5th story, though, I did find it quite interesting in how the whole thing plays out and certain things that the characters do. I will admit that the slow pace of it did kind of draw me out of it. And the 6th one just kind of happens. It kind of just abruptly starts and then abruptly ends, and I don't really see what is to get from it. Whereas with like the first story, you're getting comedy, you're getting humour from it. In the prospector story, you're getting loads of different things from it. Whereas the 6th story just kind of starts and then ends, and I don't really see the point of it. It's not bad, but again, it just kind of leaves a lackluster taste in your mouth, especially considering that the movie ends on that one, and that story ends abruptly anyway. Apart from that, the directing, the writing, and the cinematography are all on top form like usual Coen Brothers movies are, which is why I'm going to give The Ballad of Buster Scruggs an 8 out of 10. I can't really see myself going any higher with this because of those last 2 stories, but everything from a technical aspect and those first 4 stories being as good as they are cements the fact that I give this movie an 8. The next movie is called Terminal, and it's directed by Vaughn Stein, and it's not that good. It's really not that good at all. Out of all the movies I'm going to be talking about in this video, this one definitely has wasted potential written all over it. I mean, you've got a great cast with the likes of Margot Robbie, Dexter Fletcher, and Simon Pegg. But even they feel wasted in this film. There's a lot of things that could have been done really well in this movie, but unfortunately just kind of fall flat in a sense. And it's a shame because I went into this movie hoping there would be some redeeming aspect to it, but unfortunately, the redeeming aspects it does have aren't enough to make it a good film. First of all, the cinematography, though it looks good at first, very quickly becomes noticeably shit. The lighting and the way every location is shot very quickly makes it look more low budget and fake than it probably actually is. Because there's quite a few moments where the lighting and the overall look of these places that are in the film just looks so staged and so over-stylized that it kind of looks like you're watching a low-budget short film instead of a proper movie. And it's kind of a shame because the cinematography does start off pretty good, but then just progressively gets more and more crap as the film goes on. Then you have the plot, which for the most part is actually quite interesting and intriguing. But then at one point gets so convoluted that it's actually kind of hard to follow, and then that is then ruined by this exposition dump that happens towards the end of the movie that just takes you completely out of the experience and kind of ruins the intrigue that the plot had. On top of that, you have editing that is just annoying to watch and a soundtrack that really got on my nerves very quickly. Yeah, this really is not a good movie. I think the only redeeming aspect this movie has are some of the performances. Margot Robbie is quite entertaining to watch in the film, though her accent is a little bit questionable at times. Simon Pegg's pretty good. Dexter Fletcher makes the most of what he has. Mike Myers, I don't quite know what he's doing in this movie, but I suppose he's not awful. I've seen him do worse. But yeah, this movie, I don't quite know what it was trying to go for. And I think it kind of shows in the movie. Like, it's trying to do multiple different things at once. And doesn't even succeed at doing even one of those things correctly. Which is why I'm going to give Terminal a 5 out of 10. Like I said, there was potential there, but unfortunately, it just really didn't deliver. Next up, we have First Man, directed by Damien Chazelle, and as most of you should know by now, this movie follows the journey that Neil Armstrong took to get to the moon. I was really excited to see this movie, and if you've been following my channel for a certain amount of time, I think you will know why, because Damien Chazelle is very quickly becoming one of the best directors working today. His first movie, Whiplash, is one of my all-time favourites, and his follow-up, La La Land, though I do think it was quite overhyped at the time, still is an incredibly well-made film. First Man, though it is a good movie, is nowhere near as good as either of those two films. It's still good, but unfortunately lacks something that both of those two films had. First off, I will of course start with the positives. Everything from a technical aspect in this movie is brilliant. What Damien Chazelle and co have been able to pull off in this movie is mind-blowing. Everything from the visuals to the sound design and just the overall look of this movie just works so well. And the change in camera quality also really benefits the movie as well. Most of the stuff down on Earth was filmed, I think, with 16mm film, and it really does show because there's a subtle little grain in a few shots, and it kind of adds to the authenticity of it all. It feels like something from the time that this movie happened. Like, it's set in the 60s, and it feels like something that could have been made in the 60s. So in that sense, and all the little subtle things like that, works really well. When it gets to the actual space stuff, again, how the fuck they filmed it, I do not know. But it's mind-blowing to say the least. And the fact that most of it, if not all of it, was practical, just blows my mind even more. Especially if you compare it to a film like Gravity, which I really like, manages to do a very similar thing but in computers, and then you have First Man, which manages to pull off, again, very similar techniques, but all in camera. It's just amazing what they're able to do. The performances are all really good. My boy Ryan, he's just as good as he always is. There are a couple of times where his stoic nature and representation of Neil Armstrong does kind of get in the way of some of the more personal and emotional moments, but by the end of the movie it pays off so well with a really touching moment towards the end of the film that I don't know whether it actually happened or not, but it works. It really, really works for the sake of the movie. Claire Foy, again, is really, really good as Neil Armstrong's wife, and a lot of the side performances as well from like Jason Clarke and, you know, other people like that, they're all really good as well. The soundtrack, though I think it could have done, you know, packed a bit more of an impact and a bit more of a punch, was pretty good for the most part. In terms of nitpicks that I have with this movie, or flaws, there was a bit too much shaky cam at times. For the most part, the movie is handheld. I think actually, no, the whole movie is handheld. But when you get to like the rocket takeoffs and things going wrong in space, what Damien Chazelle and co tried to do is make you feel like you're in the cockpit with these astronauts. So when the cockpit is shaking rapidly, the camera is shaking rapidly as well. And there are a few times where the shakiness can be a bit too much and you can't actually tell what the fuck's happening. But it's not too often. It's distracting when it does happen, but again, you still understand the point of the shaky cam. It's not like watching an action film that has shaky cam for the fact that they're trying to hide bad stunt work. This is shaky cam with a purpose. The other issue I had with this movie is its length and pace. The length of the movie usually doesn't bother me, but that being said, if the pacing makes it feel as long as it is, then problems start to arise. And there are a couple of moments where the pacing and length of this movie can be felt quite considerably. And the most significant moments where the pacing is felt is in the downtime moments when Neil is at home with his wife and kids. Though those moments are very well acted and are quite interesting to look at, it's just the fact that they don't really... The pacing doesn't really go anywhere in those moments, which kind of grounds the movie not to a halt, but just slows it down and makes it chug along a little bit slower. And that contrast of having the really fast pace and intense space scenes contrasted by the incredibly slow home time scenes is a good balance. But again, those scenes of him at home with his family at times can get a bit too slow. And unfortunately, those issues that I have with the film do hold the movie back from being as great as, say, Whiplash or La La Land. But I think in the end, I like the movie enough for me to want to see it again and for me to, you know, like it, which is why I'm going to give First Man an 8.5 out of 10. The next movie up is Widows, directed by Steve McQueen, the same guy who brought us 12 Years a Slave and Shame, and it's also written by Gillian Flynn, the woman who brought us Gone Girl. I'm just going to say it, this movie's bloody brilliant. It's probably one of my favourite movies of the year, just because it works on so many different levels. The fact that Steve McQueen went from 12 Years a Slave, a filmmaking masterpiece in my opinion, to this did have me worried at first, because I thought that whole artistic side to his directing would kind of be lost in translation between 12 Years a Slave and a more conventional crime movie like Widows. I thought that whole artistic, visual side of his directing would kind of be lost. Luckily, it's not. If anything, it's stronger than it's ever been here. And there are certain things he does with the camera and the scenes and the way that they play out. It's just ingenious. Like, for example, there's one moment in particular where Colin Farrell's character gets in the back of a car, and it's literally just this one take of the car going from one place to another. And if you've seen the movie, you know exactly which bit I mean, but the subtle implications that it's getting across just through visuals alone is just perfect. And the fact that in this moment you don't actually see Colin Farrell and his assistant at all, and you're just hearing their voices, just that whole bit works really well, and I can understand why so many people were talking about that specific moment so much before the film came out. Gillian Flynn's script is very good and actually quite unpredictable at times. I think she gives each character just the right amount of time to shine in each scene. And yeah, just the amount of twists and turns the script takes, especially in the second half of the movie, never threw my interest out the window. It always kept me engaged the further the story went. So there are some movies that I've seen where the twists and turns it takes actually can take you out of the experience. Whereas with Widows, it actually draws you further in, because you're not quite sure where stuff is going to go, or what characters are going to do, or how things are going to play out. And the way things do play out in this movie are really, really good and are incredibly effective. All of the performances in this movie are fantastic. Viola Davis is really good. Elizabeth Debicki was surprisingly good in this movie, and the reason I say that is because the only other thing I've seen her in is The Cloverfield Paradox, and we all know how bad that movie was. But yeah, she is really good in this movie, much better than I was expecting her to be. Michelle Rodriguez was also really good in this film as well. Again, I'm used to seeing her as the badass woman stereotype, but here she actually gets time to show her acting ability, and she's actually really bloody good. But my favourite performance in the entire movie has to be Daniel Kaluuya. Every single moment he's on screen, he steals that scene. Even if it's just for like a few seconds, he steals every single thing, every single moment he's on screen. And he's utterly brilliant. This is unlike any other performance I've seen from him. He's threatening without saying many words. He just kind of has to give you one look, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm fucked. He's so good in this movie. If anything, I would just recommend you see this movie just for his performance, but trust me, there are other things in this movie that are also worth seeing this film for. In the end, I actually kind of loved Widows, which is why I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. The action in the movie is also really, really good. It's not that frequent in the film, and it's actually quite sparse, but when it does happen, it hits you right in the gut, and it's really, really effective. The final movie that I want to talk about is Happy New Year, Colin, Burstead, the brand new movie from Ben Wheatley, the same guy who brought us Free Fire and High Rise. And this was the only one that I was contemplating doing a full-on review for, because I saw this movie as part of the Brighton Cine City Film Festival, so I kind of wanted to do my own full-length special review for it, kind of like what I did with Thunder Road for the London Film Festival. But again, I just thought to myself, I'm not going to have the time to do a full-length review of this film, so I thought I would just do it in this video and get it out of the way. And again, this movie is also really, really good. It's a completely different beast to his other movies, though. If you're going into this film expecting another High Rise, or another Sightseers, or another film similar to Free Fire, you're not going to get that here. If anything, this is probably the most down-to-earth, realistic, and dramatically driven movie I've seen from him ever. Everything about this movie, from the premise to the characters to the setting, feels very grounded in reality and realistic, and I think that's mostly down to the conditions in which they filmed in and Ben Wheatley's directing approach. They had a space of 2 weeks to film this movie, with a budget of £500,000, and Ben Wheatley's style of directing is very loose anyway and very free to let the actors do what they want to do. So all of that culminates in what feels like the most genuine and natural set of events I think I've seen in a movie for a long time. Because as I was watching this film, I was very aware that these were actors. Like, yes, that's Charles Dance, or yes, that's Bill Patterson. But as you're watching this movie, it kind of just feels like this is a normal family gathering that's kind of going awry, and they just feel like normal people, which I don't really get to say that often in movies, but here it works incredibly well. The script and all the improvised moments do a good job of making all of these interactions between the characters feel very genuine. They bounce off of each other in just the right way that feels like you're actually looking at actual conversations taking place. It never feels over-dramatized, and there's quite a lot of humour in the movie as well that is very well handled. Again, that humour aspect of the movie never feels too distracting. Again, it feels very genuine and like the humour is happening right in front of you. It's very normal and natural. The only nitpick I do have with this movie is that the camera work can be a bit all over the place in a few parts, but that's a little bit excusable seeing that they only had 2 weeks to film the entire thing. Apart from that though, this is a very good movie that I actually can't wait for you guys to see. Apparently it's going to be on BBC Two over the Christmas period, which makes sense considering this movie is set on New Year's Eve. So yeah, if you get a chance to see this one, I highly recommend it, and I'm going to give Happy New Year Colin Burstead a 9 out of 10 as well. And yeah, that is all the movies that I wanted to talk about. I'm kind of glad I did this, so now I can get those movies kind of ticked off the list. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see me do a similar thing to this in the future, then please let me know, because I would happily do it again. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!